I used to believe that growing old meant growing quieter. That with age came a sort of peace, the kind you earn after a life of sacrifice. I thought if I gave enough, loved hard enough, and stayed out of the way when needed, I'd be cared for in return. Not celebrated, I didn't need that. Just considered. But I was wrong. My name is Marilyn. I'm 63 years old, and I live in a modest yellow cottage tucked behind some palm trees in the Florida Keys. It smells faintly of saltwater and lemons, and the back porch creaks when the wind comes in off the Gulf. It's not fancy, but it's mine. Or at least, it was before I got convinced otherwise. It started small. After my husband died 6 years ago, my son David offered to help me manage things better. He and his wife Brittany were good with technology, and I still had a flip phone back then. David sat me down one Sunday afternoon, his voice all warmth and concern. "Mom, let's just link your account with ours," he said. "That way we can help with bills, prescriptions, anything you need. It'll be easier for all of us." I remember the way he held my hand across the table. How his eyes softened like I was a child again, not a woman who raised him through layoffs, medical bills, and nights of boiled pasta and canned tuna. I nodded. I wanted to believe him. In the beginning, it was fine. Better than fine, even. My prescriptions came on time, groceries showed up on the doorstep, and Brittany even added me to her online shopping list. Sometimes she'd send me lavender bath salts or those teas she liked from Whole Foods. It felt thoughtful. Then it changed. Little by little, I started seeing things I didn't recognize on my statements. Streaming services I never watched. Deliveries for office decor from websites I'd never heard of. When I asked David, he'd wave it off. "It's easier to just run everything through one account," he said. "We settle it all later." I didn't want to be the nagging mother. I've seen how friends get treated when they pry, seen the eye rolls, the sighs. So I stayed quiet. I swallowed my unease like a bitter pill. Until I needed my actual pills. It was a Thursday morning, humid and heavy. My joints ached worse than usual. The bottle of heart medication, Carvedilol, was nearly empty. I left a sticky note on the fridge, "Need refill." I assumed Brittany would handle it. She always did. But the next day, the bottle was still empty. That evening, Brittany breezed through my kitchen like a hostess at her own party. I asked about the refill. "Oh," she said, chewing a piece of gum. "We'll get to it after the trip." I blinked. "What trip?" She hesitated for half a second, just enough to crack her smile. "The cruise. David didn't tell you? 7 days in the Caribbean. It's been a stressful year. We need this." A cold knot tightened in my chest. I tried to breathe past it. "But my medication." "It's not like it's urgent," she cut in, waving her hand. "We'll refill it when we get back. You're fine." She kissed me on the cheek and walked out like she hadn't just punched me in the ribs. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan above me whirred, but my heart thudded louder. At 2:14 a.m., I picked up my iPad and opened Facebook. There it was. A photo of David and Brittany and their two girls standing on the dock, all in coordinated navy and white outfits, sunglasses gleaming. The caption read, "Palm Tree Family First. Cruise into peace, love, and adventure, ship." I stared at it until the screen blurred. Family first? I checked my bank app. A $6,420 charge from Royal Caribbean sat in the pending column. The account had less than $300 left. That was my medication money. That was my security. That was my trust, twisted into a luxury vacation hashtag. I sat in the dark, my fingers shaking, the taste of betrayal sour and metallic in my mouth. My chest began to tighten. I couldn't tell if it was the anger or the missing pills. Maybe both. I called the pharmacy the next morning. The woman on the line, sweet, young, and too cheerful, said my refill hadn't been submitted. "Looks like your card didn't go through," she added, like it was no big deal. I hung up. I didn't cry. I just stood in my kitchen, gripping the counter like it was the last stable thing in my life. At 11:03 a.m., I walked across the street to my neighbor, Geraldine. She was 78 and sharper than any tack I'd ever met. She looked me up and down, then poured us coffee without asking. "Marilyn," she said, "they're treating you like a side note." I nodded slowly. I think I stopped being a mother and started being an ATM. She didn't laugh. She just handed me her landline phone and said, "Call your bank." And I did. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but when the voice on the other end asked, "How can I assist you today?" I knew. I took a long breath, steadied my voice, and said, "I want to revoke all authorized users. And I want to freeze the account." The silence on the line was immediate. But mine had just begun to break. The thing no one tells you about betrayal is how physical it is. It doesn't just hurt your feelings. It sinks its teeth into your bones. It makes you forget how to breathe. It makes every step feel like dragging a weight that isn't yours. That night after freezing the account, I sat on my porch with a blanket over my knees, staring at the empty street like it might offer an answer. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My body was too stiff, my chest too tight. The next morning, I tried to make toast and couldn't grip the butter knife. My hands, already arthritic, trembled from the skipped medication. That's when I realized something chilling. I could die, and they wouldn't even know until after the cruise. And what would they say when they found me? That's such a shame. If only she'd spoken up. But I had. They just didn't care. I called the pharmacy again, hoping they'd somehow filled the prescription despite the failed card. No. Still declined. I asked if I could pay directly over the phone, and they said yes, but I need to come in with ID. I told Geraldine. She drove me. It was humiliating, not because of the drive, but because the tech behind the counter raised an eyebrow at the charge history. "You're Marilyn Thomas, right? This card was used for several online purchases this month, furniture and, sunglasses." I smiled weakly and handed her my license. That wasn't me. She didn't press. She just rang up the medication and said, "You should take your dose now if you can." I did. Right there at the pharmacy, with shaking hands and water from Geraldine's thermos. It was the first moment in days that I felt human again. But as I stepped outside into the Florida heat, I felt something else, not peace. Rage. A deep, aching rage that I'd been convinced I didn't deserve to feel. Because I'm a mother. And mothers are supposed to forgive everything. Aren't we? That afternoon, I sat down at my little writing desk, the one David gave me years ago, back when gifts were still given with love, and opened the financial folder I kept hidden in the bottom drawer. I began making lists. Accounts. Passwords. What was still in my name. What they'd quietly shifted. What stunned me most wasn't the money they'd used. It was how easily I had let them. They hadn't stolen from me. Not at first. I handed them the keys. I let them paint the walls of my life in colors I didn't choose. I let them tell me I was safer if I just stayed small. And now I was sick. Not just physically, but emotionally, like I'd swallowed poison and convinced myself it was tea. That evening, I made myself a proper dinner for the first time in a week. Grilled salmon, a side of peas, and a small glass of Chardonnay. I ate alone at my table, no longer watching the clock for when they'd call. Because I knew they wouldn't. They were somewhere off the coast of Cozumel, sipping cocktails bought with the last of my stability. I opened Brittany's Instagram again. There it was. A photo of her in a flowing dress, holding a mimosa. The caption read, "You can't pour from an empty cup. Fill yourself first." I wanted to laugh. I actually did, one sharp, bitter sound. I wondered if she thought about the irony. Probably not. I scrolled down to the comments. People were admiring the cruise ship, asking for links to her sunglasses. "Such a great mom," someone had written. I closed the app. That night, I didn't sleep either. But not from sadness. From planning. I printed out my account statements. I circled every unauthorized expense. I made a list of every monthly charge I wanted to cancel. And then I called my lawyer. Yes, I have one. His name's Frank. He helped with my husband's estate. We haven't spoken in 2 years. "Marilyn," he answered, groggy. "It's been a while. I need to rewrite my will," I said. There was a pause. "Everything all right?" "No," I said softly. "But it's about to be." I stayed up until dawn, drinking decaf and organizing every paper I'd ignored for years. I hadn't felt this awake in a decade. Later that morning, I went into the bank in person. Sat down across from a young woman named Lila, who wore glasses too big for her face and smiled nervously as she asked why I wanted to separate all my assets. Just a precaution, I said. She nodded, typing away. You sure you want to revoke all co-signers? It might make access harder for your family. That's the point, I said. When I got home, Geraldine met me on the porch with 2 mugs of coffee. You look different, she said. I feel different, I replied. And I did. I felt like a woman again. Not a burden. Not an afterthought. A woman with a spine. With anger that had finally turned into action. A few hours later, as the sun began to set, I received a notification. Cruise payment declined. I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I smiled without pain. Let them feel the shock. Let them wonder why their world was cracking. Because they were about to learn something I had forgotten myself. You do not steal from a woman who spent her whole life giving. You do not gamble with the heart of someone who kept yours beating. And you never, ever confuse kindness for weakness. They came home on a Tuesday. I knew because I saw the airport photos go up before I heard a single word from them. David posted a selfie with the girls at baggage claim. Brittany tagged the cruise line in a glowing review. The kids wore matching Mickey Mouse ears. No one mentioned me. No one asked if I was okay. I had imagined this moment, the confrontation, so many times in the week they were gone. I pictured rage. I imagined tears. I rehearsed dramatic speeches in the mirror. But when the door opened and Brittany waltzed in, sun-kissed and talking loudly on her phone, I didn't feel rage. I felt cold. Like a lake in winter. Still. Flat. Dangerous beneath the surface. David followed, dragging a suitcase. He gave me a half smile like I was some neighbor who'd watered his plants while he was away. Hey, Mom, he said. We're back. I nodded and sat at the kitchen table, a manila folder in front of me. I didn't say a word. Brittany poured herself a smoothie. You wouldn't believe the food on the ship. Lobster tail. Prime rib. I probably gained 10 pounds. I looked up. I wouldn't know. I was here. Alone. Without my heart meds. She froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. You didn't refill them? I said it slowly. You didn't. David looked confused. I thought Brittany handled that. She bristled. I told her we'd get it after the trip. It wasn't urgent. I stood. My knees cracked, but I stood tall. It was vital. But I guess a Caribbean buffet mattered more than my heartbeat. The room went quiet. David sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. Mom, we didn't mean for things to get so dramatic. It's just money. No, I said, stepping closer, voice shaking. It's not just money. It's respect. It's trust. You used my retirement like it was your vacation fund. You lied to my face. And you let me go without medication while you drank cocktails under the sun. You're being unfair, Brittany snapped. We needed that trip. Mental health matters too. I laughed, loud, raw, almost ugly. You cared about your health. Not mine. I slid the manila folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, screenshots, printed captions from Brittany's Instagram, and the note from the pharmacy. David flipped through it, face darkening with each page. I froze the account, I said. Cancelled the cards. Transferred the rest to my name alone. You what? Brittany gasped. You don't have access anymore, I said calmly. Not to my accounts. Not to my house. This is insane, she said, laughing nervously. You live in our house. I stared at her. No. I live in my house. The deed says Marilyn Thomas. The mortgage was paid off by me and your father, not your cruise posts. David looked like he'd been slapped. You don't have to be cruel. Cruel. My voice cracked. Let me tell you what's cruel. Cruel is knowing your mother is sick and deciding she can wait. Cruel is taking what isn't yours, smiling for the camera, and blaming the person you robbed. I'm your son, he whispered. And I loved you more than life, I said, tears now brimming. I gave you everything. But love is not a license to steal. It's not a blank check. Silence fell again. Brittany spoke first. So what now? You just cut us off. No, I said softly. I'm cutting myself free. I picked up my purse. Geraldine was outside, waiting in her car. I had packed the night before. I walked to the door, paused, and looked back one last time. My eyes landed on the photo of David as a child, sitting on my shoulders at the beach. I remembered how heavy he felt even then. How happy. You were the best thing I ever gave myself to, I said. But I'm done being your safety net. From now on, you'll walk your own tightrope. And then I walked out. The senior living facility I moved into wasn't the sad place people imagine. It was bright. It had gardens. It smelled of lemon cleaner and lavender. It had dignity. They gave me a tour. I smiled and nodded. I felt like a stranger stepping into a life that should have started earlier, a life where I mattered. That night, in my new room, I placed a single photo on the dresser. Me and Geraldine holding fishing rods, laughing like children. I didn't cry. I just exhaled. The next morning, my lawyer called. We finalized everything. Your estate is now protected. The house title has been updated. Joint accounts dissolved. I thanked him. I hung up. Then I sat by the window with my tea and realized something astonishing. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. Awake to the truth that silence isn't always kindness. That family, when unchecked, can become the very hands that push you off the cliff while asking why you didn't fly. And maybe, just maybe, it was time they learned to fall on their own. The quiet in my new place was different. It wasn't the kind of quiet that made you feel forgotten. It was peace. The first week I moved into the senior living community, I kept waiting for a message. A knock on the door. An apology. Some acknowledgement from David or Brittany. But it never came. Instead, what came were notifications. From the bank. Cruise payment failed. Please resolve. From the credit card company. Fraud investigation open due to disputed charges. From Brittany's Instagram. Posts disappeared. Stories went silent. She went from uploading glamorous vacation reels to radio silence in a matter of days. I learned later, through Geraldine, who knew someone at their church, that they'd maxed out their credit, and the cruise company had sent collections after them. Their card had been frozen. Their credit score had plummeted. David tried applying for a small business loan. It was denied. They were shocked. But I wasn't. Actions always have a cost. Mine had cost me time, health, and trust. Theirs was finally coming due in dollars. And still, they didn't call. Not even once. I spent my days differently now. I joined a book club on Tuesdays. Took a watercolor class on Thursdays. Planted tomatoes in the community garden, a stubborn little plot that reminded me of the woman I used to be before I forgot how to say no. There was a retired teacher named May who lived down the hall. She called me Red because of my cardigan. She told me my laugh sounded like someone who used to love music. She wasn't wrong. For the first time in years, I began humming while making tea. I started sleeping through the night. I stopped checking my phone for someone who never intended to check on me. And then, one day, a letter came. It wasn't handwritten. It wasn't even signed. Just typed on plain paper. Mom, we didn't think you'd actually go through with all of this. I get that you're upset. Brittany says you're being emotional, but I think you're trying to make a point. Well, you made it. Can we talk now? David. I folded it twice and threw it in the trash. They still didn't get it. This wasn't about making a point. This was about survival. 3 weeks later, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered. Mom. His voice cracked. David. I didn't know you moved out. I let the silence answer him. I just assumed you'd get over it. That you'd come back. That we could work it out. I took a slow breath. You didn't notice that I was gone? There was a pause. I thought you were being dramatic. Dramatic. That word again. No, I said. You know what's dramatic, David? What's dramatic is leaving your mother with no medicine so you could post family first from a ship I paid for. What's dramatic is acting like my bank account is a faucet you can drink from forever. What's dramatic is the silence you gave me after you came home and realized the money dried up. He said nothing. Mom, he finally whispered. We messed up. Brittany's upset. She's crying every night. And where was her crying? I asked, voice tightening, when I sat in the dark for 3 nights with my chest hurting and no one answering their phone. I didn't know it was that bad, he mumbled. Because you didn't care enough to ask. I don't want to lose you. I almost left. He hadn't had me in a long time. Not really. Not since I became more useful as a number than a name. You already did, I said. But here's the difference. I didn't die. I didn't fade. I chose to live again, without you draining the life out of me. The line went quiet. I ended the call. And that, too, was a kind of peace. 6 months passed. I never heard from them again. But I didn't grieve it like I thought I would. Because something unexpected bloomed in that absence. Freedom. I started volunteering at the local library, reading to children whose mothers worked late shifts. One little girl, Ava, hugged me every Tuesday and said I smelled like cookies and safety. I met a man named Leonard who ran the community garden and flirted by leaving packets of seeds on my bench. I danced once at a Friday social, to Elvis of all things. And I laughed so hard, I had to sit down. I was alive, not surviving, living. And every now and then I'd hear someone say something about forgiving family, and I'd smile. But I wouldn't agree. Because sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do isn't sacrifice more. It's stop bleeding for people who keep handing her knives. Now, when I wake up, I don't think about who might be using my money. I think about what I'm going to paint next, what book I'll read, what recipe I'll try. And sometimes, just sometimes, when I walk by the mirror, I see her. The woman I used to be. Not the exhausted giver. Not the fragile mother. But the woman with fire in her eyes and a spine made of quiet storms. I smile at her. And she smiles back. Because she finally remembered something no one should ever forget. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for walking away from people who refuse to see your worth. You are not broken for needing more than survival. You are not an afterthought. You are the whole damn story. And I took back the pen.